Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Erin of her horse Rumour. Rumour is a 4-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred that she's been working for a while. We've seen one other submission, and I suggested that she get the horse in Shambo, and she wasn't quite getting the horse all the way there. Now, what I'd say here right in the very beginning is you're still not getting the horse all the way there, but it's way better than it was. So beginning to get the horse working a little more actively, which of course is the first step to getting that done. Now, you had talked about in your brief little summary there since the last time, you talked about how the horse is pulling a bit to the outside and the head is to the outside, and that's very normal. Remember that no horse can bend laterally until it bends longitudinally, as simple as that. So we never even think about bending the horse on the side until it gets over its back, that is, lifts its back. When we do that, automatically the horse can just bend from side to side. It's effortless to bend a horse that's working over its back, and it also eliminates, for the most part, that feeling like the horse is one-sided, so to speak, because that's really what allows the horse's vertebrae to come up and then to loosen when they come up, so then the horse can create bend. So, and always remember, when we talk about bending a horse, it always means in the middle of the horse's back. But now, having said that, this is certainly going better than it was in the last video. It's starting to swing there more. Now, this horse still has a ways to go, but I think you're on the right track. Now, you said in your video that you were having trouble getting the horse to respond to the whip, and therefore you got a louder cracking whip. Now, just know that that's really not the way you want to go. We don't want to crack the whip at the horse, because if we do, even the most sensitive thoroughbreds, at first when you do that, they will respond to the sound, but in time, when they get used to the sound, it no longer will bother them at all. I mean, just like you can get a horse used to firing a gun off its back if you just give them time to do it. Not that you want to do that, but it has been done in the past, and that's the way they did it. So once again, the horse will just get used to that sound if it doesn't associate that sound with something else, that is, being actually touched with the whip. Now, the other thing to realize, too, that if you're ever working around other people and you start cracking a whip like that, it's going to drive everybody's horses crazy all around you. So really, that's not the way you want to go. You want to really never crack the whip. You'll hardly ever hear me. I'll never actually crack a whip at a horse. It might crack by accident once in a while if I just don't get it used right exactly. That is, I don't run it out perfectly. But when I want to use it, I'm going to have to get close enough. I always use the longest lunge whip I can find. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, so I can handle a pretty big one. Once again, you want to be sure that your whip that you're using is not so heavy that you can't actually use it accurately. And remember, I always tell people, if you're really wanting to learn to lunge, you need to learn the art of using a whip, which means go in the backyard someplace where you're away from horses and just practice hitting the same spot over and over again. I would say, we want to always touch that horse in that fleshy part above the hocks in the back of the buttocks. Is usually where we hit the horse. Once in a while, we touch the horse on its side, and once in a while, if you're very good at this, and a horse flips on you, you can touch him on the shoulder to bring him back the other way. But that requires a very, very skilled hand in order to do that. It's better to just go up to the horse if you don't know how to do it and haven't done it successfully, because you can certainly end up, really freaking the horse out and getting it spinning around in circles with the line around it, which I've seen many people do. So where you really want to hit the horse most of the time, and that is that fleshy area above the hocks. Now, this horse is walking. Everything looks better than it did the last time I saw it. There's improvement here, but you're just not quite all the way there yet. We can still see how there's kind of, as the horse walks in the step, it kind of brings its head up, and almost, you can see its back almost dropping a little bit in the step and the walk, because it can't just step through in rhythm. Now, once again, it's better than it was, but you see how the kind of study the hind leg there for a moment, and you see how there's this funny little moment of hesitation, which tells me that basically what that is, it's just like a machine where the gears are not lining up correctly, and that's exactly what happens with horses if we don't have their backs up. Everything inside them, just like a human athlete, if you tried to run with your knees locked out or something like that, you'd find it very difficult. Well, horses do too. So there's an optimal position for the horse's body to work that puts the least stress on the joints, and that's what we're trying to do. That's what we have to do in order to keep working a horse successfully over years and years and not have its little front legs wear out from all the wear and tear. Once again, that's why we see so much navicular, ring bone, side bone. And now in the dressage horses, we're seeing it's all the hocks they're blowing out, because once again, if a horse is really hollow and you're trying to do these upper level movements, it's putting huge strain on the tendons, and especially those little bones inside the hock, because the body, it's pushing too far behind the back. So Once again, relatively speaking, you shouldn't need horse injections. I think maybe we have a horse or two that gets legend every now and then that's 20 years old, but it shouldn't be happening to a 4-year-old. I say if the horse doesn't have enough joint fluid, you're working the horse too much. But once again, now this is looking active, and I can see what you mean. See how he pulls to the outside there a little bit. But once again, that's what we need to do now, is get you to work a little closer. So you can bring the horse on a little smaller circle so that you can start to do, now that's good. You bring him around there, and you see how when you take a little contact, that gets the stretch. Now that's what you want to do all the time. So every time the horse goes out and comes up and bends to the outside, you want to bring the horse actually just a little more in on the circle with your line and push the hindquarters away from you. That'll put the horse in a little bit of a position of a shoulder in, which you can even see there coming around that corner when the horse does start to stretch a little bit. Watch how much deeper the inside hind leg steps underneath the center of the body and pushes up. And really that's what a shoulder in or leg heel does. When you feel a shoulder in or leg heel correctly, you'll feel your inside seat bone lifted as the horse is moving up and over. But good stretch here, and this is, as I said, better than what you got in the last video. So you're almost there if you just stick with what you're doing, but try not to spend so much time letting the horse just sort of go around you doing whatever it wants to do. So I would like to see you just getting a little closer to the horse. Now that means you have to take a much more active step. So you're actually walking a circle yourself. Because if you need to be able to touch the horse with the whip. Now that's really good there though. Has a moment. So that's the moment right there as he comes back up. You should have just sent him on forward. As soon as that head comes up, you want to get him a little closer and push those hindquarters away from you again so he engages under the center of his body, and then you'll see him go right back in the stretch, which is what he's doing when he comes around on that side. Right there. Oh. Same issue here. You see how when you came around that quarter, at first his hindquarters were to the inside and his head was up, and then they came in, they pushed out a little bit, and he started to stretch down. So that's really what you need to work on here, is just getting him working a little closer to you, you walking a little more with him, and every time he hollows like that, you just push the hindquarters away from you. Now that's also part of submission, you know. If you've ever watched horses in fields together and how they come up to each other, they will threaten each other with their hindquarters. Now, the head guy, if the other one doesn't back down, will go after them. So that's exactly what we're learning here, is that we're teaching them to yield their body away from us. And that's really what submission is all about. Once you can get that, everything grows out of that, and that's a very natural thing if you understand what I'm saying. Now, in nature, while horses do that to each other, they would never hold, they don't stop the front end, right? So that's what we must not do either, is not prevent the horse from moving by having so much contact in the front end. And of course, that's what leads to, if you have these really good moving horses, they end up really high in the hips because they can't go through if you're holding them against your hand, so they end up popping the hindquarters up, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do when we do dressage. Or at least it was what we were trying to do until a recent history, when suddenly it's become, it's actually been a slow spiral for years, but just in the last 20 years, especially in the last 10, we've really seen it go to extreme levels of hollowness and forced riding. There, as it starts to stretch. And you're having moments here that it's very, very good. So once again, I think you're right on the right track here. And you're going to get there. Always remembering that even if you can't get the stretch all the way there in the trot, if you can get it in the walk, you can at least get it in the walk and end every day with it in the walk. And that's what we want to do. We always want to end the horse showing the horse where it needs to be. And then it will come back and be even easier. Once again, a good rider is always thinking ahead to what they're doing. Is how is the horse going to come out the next time, instead of ending every session with a horse in a lather, the way so many people do today, trying to force them into movements over and over and over again. We want the horse to want to come out. In riding time, the horse should be, if you train them correctly, they look forward to coming out and working. They're enthusiastic. When you get a horse like that, it really tries for you. That is if you're trying the right things. Now, if you're trying to simply make the horse do these kind of phony trots where the horse is throwing its legs straight out from the shoulders while its hindquarters are out behind it, you're never going to get a partner in that, because that's the opposite of how the horse is supposed to move. So the horse is always going to resist that, and so you'll never see a horse go into that frame on its own. It's just, and that's not what it is. But once again, you will see horses stretch on their own and get over their backs. If you ever see horses that actually live out where they actually can move enough of the time, that is, they're constantly moving over grass, they look this way. They look over the back. And once again, when you get horses like that in to train, it's much easier. Unfortunately, so many horses today that come, that start being in training have already been, set around, or they've been raised in too small of a pen where they've hardly moved around their whole lives. And just like children, you'll hear me say this a lot, they're creating sort of couch potato horses that take a really long time to develop, because once again, just like a child, who's never exercised and is 20 years old, it's going to take a lot longer, to get in shape than somebody who's even a little out of shape, but who's done something their whole life. So horses are the same way. So if you always want to think in terms of, this basic work, it's going to take at least 2 years. So before you start evaluating, thinking this isn't working or not working, you want to give it some real time, because that's what it takes. And once you have confidence in that, and once again, that's why we're doing our website, so people can actually see this being done to horses and see how easy it is to develop them. If you just keep doing the right things day after day after day, they develop into what you want, instead of being forced into something that's some kind of image of that, but isn't really it. Remember, that was the whole basis for saddlebreds and all these kind of things. They were imitating correctly trained horses, but making them so that somebody who doesn't know how to ride can sit on their backs because there's no movement. You have to be very athletic to ride a dressage horse. Any horse, period. But once again, if you want to do this well, we have to really be able to carry ourselves there. Now, that's beautiful now. So this is getting into a really good place, and this is far better than what I saw in the last video. There's a little longer step. The stretch is getting better. So no, the beauty of this is that once the horse actually gets it, now that's one to say, sometimes people will come to us and they'll have horses that have, like thoroughbreds and Arabs, that have been lunged for so many hours and hours that they're so hyper fit that it really takes a long time. And with those horses, and even sometimes with the ones coming back from the racetrack, if they've been badly handled, the best thing to do with them is just to let them go out, if they're in the peak of fitness, and just turn them out in the pasture for a while. A couple of months is all it takes. And let them get a little fat and lazy, and then start again. Because when you're dealing with that level of fitness, with a horse that has no control, it's going to take a really long time to get it to settle down, just by virtue of how fit it is. So we don't want to spend hours and hours training a horse. We really want to keep our training sessions to, basically 20 to 40 minutes, an hour at the tops, but closer to 30 or 40 is better. And just do everything right and get the job done. It's amazing how quickly you can actually ride a horse and school it up through Grand Prix if you just keep putting one step in front of the other. And always coming back to the stretch, and that's the thing to realize. The stretch is something we do up through all the levels. This is getting much better. Now you can see the horse is still pulling here. Look, if you look at the forehand here, it's still just kind of grabbing and snagging there. But look how it goes. As it starts to go down, you see how the shoulder starts to swing. When it comes up, you can literally see that the horse is grabbing with its front feet and pulling itself forward. That's why horses develop that underside of their neck. That's from pulling with their shoulders, like you see the horse doing right there. That's what he's doing. So as you see him stretch down, that's why it looks so much more beautiful, of course, because it looks like it's uninterrupted. When the horse is like that, you can really see what the horse is really doing is almost putting the brakes on with each step so that it can stab the front foot and pull itself forward. We even see badly jumping horses. They do the same thing over fences. They don't jump off their hind end. They jump off of their front ends, where they just bound off of their shoulders. Which, of course, yes, they can do it that way, and some of them jump very, very high that way. But it's, I guarantee you that their career will be very short-lived, even if it's a big time when they win lots of stuff. Of course, these days, so many horses are kept going on needles for so many years. And that's why we talk about, how these horses, when they're done, there's no schoolmasters anymore, because by now, from all these injections, by the time a horse they give up on them, it's just never going to be sound again, because all the joints are completely worn out. Once again, you can see that he stretches down there. That's good. Once again, look how different the shoulder starts to swing when the horse gets in that position. It doesn't look like it's bracing against the front legs anymore. As it comes up, once again, you get that impression of the horse stopping against its front feet, which of course what it starts doing. That is grabbing and pulling. There, and then it starts to swing. You can see how the shoulder becomes free. So you're doing a great job here. I'm liking everything that I'm seeing. It's well improved over the last time I saw it. And once again, I want you to think about that idea of not snapping the whip at the horse, but getting closer to it so that once in a while you can tap it with the horse if you need to, which means you're going to have to walk a lot faster and walk a little bit of it. Like you'll be walking a 10-meter circle yourself while the horse is out there ahead of you. If you ever see that Spanish riding school, they always lunged horses with two guys. They had a guy who handled the rope and the guy who handled the whip so that they could lunge them on really big circles. But those guys had to be long-legged and fast walkers. Very nice into that stretch there. So once again, we're kind of stuck in this place where it's just a little bit up and down and up and down. And as I said before, what you want to do is just bring them in. So you bring that forehand in a little bit, get a little closer to the horse so you can push the hindquarters out. So that's how you can speed up this process of getting the horse, not letting it get away from you. Just like when we ride. So you think about it, the rein is your rein, that is the line, and the whip is your leg. So you must keep the horse ahead of your leg all the time and swinging forward under the body. So I always recommend that people, even before they learn to ride, I think should learn to lunge horses to give them an idea of how this really should be done. Another similar good thing to do, strangely enough, is to learn how to walk a dog correctly. That is so the dog never pulls on the rein. You give the horse the dog a little check, and then you release. You immediately release so the dog doesn't pull against your hand. I see many people who actually, we've all seen them. The person has the dog that is dragging them down the street. So that's why I say it's a good exercise for people that are trying to learn this, just to learn how to walk a dog correctly so it walks alongside of you and keeps a certain length on the leash, but without bearing down on the leash. And we achieve that once again by giving and taking, just like we would riding. So good practice, and then step up to lunging horses. So it's great practice for riders. And also, you really get to study the horse. Anybody that's never lunged a horse has probably never really looked at one. So it really gives you an opportunity to study the gaits of the horse, to look at its mind, look at its eye, to see how it's reacting to things. So once again, correct lunging is just riding from the ground. There's no difference, except that you're just not on its back, of course. Really good there as it comes around there. That's really nice. So that whole backside of that circle, see, that's absolutely lovely. So it's not going to be long, even doing this the way you're doing it, is not going to be long before you're going to get this horse to stay, and it's just going to stay there. Because, of course, once again, we're showing the horse a more comfortable way to work, and that's why this works. We're setting the horse up to work as if nature intended, that is, allowing its body to work correctly. Nice there as it comes in. Every time you get the stretch, the horse looks very different. So once again, I think that thing of even varying the circles, that's another thing you can try if you're unable to walk fast enough to keep this horse going. And once again, you have to be realistic of that. I'm very tall, so I can keep up with most horses and walk a very large circle. But if not, and even if you can, you want to start bringing this horse in a little bit on the circles and experiment. So every time the horse goes out a bit, bring it in 3-4 feet. And we use the circle itself as a reward. So every time the horse stretches and relaxes, we let it back out again. So you just simply bring it in a little bit. And of course, as you said, this horse kind of pulls. So you always have to be giving and taking. You can never let it be a constant pull. Just like when we ride, we can never let it be a constant pull against our hands. And especially when we work thoroughbred horses. Once again, that's what's led to all this heavy riding. If you try to ride most thoroughbred horses in this manner of, kicking, spurring, whipping, and holding on its mouth, they just go completely crazy. They won't put up with it. But once again, if you've ever been around any Tennessee walkers and these kind of things, I mean, these horses that are just constantly abused, they're really sweet horses. That's why you see these saddlebred people, having to shoot fireworks off at the horses and things like this. And believe me, I've seen it many times. Because they're such dull horses and such sweet horses that, they put up with all of the torture that these people put them through. Horses are amazingly stoic creatures. It always amazes me that the testament to their goodwill is how few people actually do get killed by them. But if we learn to treat them right and let them move as nature intended, they become very happy in their work, and they're happy to do what we want to do, just like a dog would be. Imagine if you had a dog and you wanted to hunt and okay, now a dog wants you to hunt, but you're going to tie its legs all together so it can't really move, and it's not going to appreciate it. Well, the horse is the same way. Horses are happy to go. They love to move. That's the whole nature of a horse. That's why I say you should never really beat a horse to move forward, because a horse that won't move, there's something wrong with it, because it's the nature of horses to move, and when they are well, they do. So if you get on a horse and it's just absolutely dead, there's probably some reason for that. So what I would do with a horse like that is simply get off and go back to the groundwork and start all over again. It's the only thing you can do to solve those problems. Start again. That's really what we have to think about it. It's not really retraining a horse. It's really just training them for the first time and going back and filling in the gaps in their education and development that they didn't get. But once again, this horse came off the racetrack. Now, I've seen plenty of horses come off the racetrack, and I used to start horses for the racetrack, both flat and over fences, when I worked in Unionville and also in Kentucky, and in my youth. And I can tell you that the good race trainers know the same thing as the good dressage trainers and the same thing as the good jumper riders. They know how to get their horses galloping over their backs. Once again, that's what makes a great 3-day event rider. Anybody doing anything for sport. Now, once again, and I qualify that, getting them over their backs without tension. There are people getting their horses over their backs, but with an enormous tension, which does just as much damage. When you roll cur a horse, you're basically getting it excited and strangling it so that you can, keep all that big movement jumping around, because you're basically strangling the horse into submission. A horse like that is never going to enjoy that work, and it's never going to last very long. And in most cases will hurt you whenever they get the chance, which is the optimal thing here. Is we do want the animals that we're working with to want to do this work and to be willing partners, because it's dangerous enough when they are, but when you add the element of the fact that the horse hates everything it's doing, you're just asking for trouble, so to speak. Once again, you've all heard me quote Bill Steinkraus many times of saying, if you can't get them to like it, it's never going to be very good. So if you're a jumper rider and you're having to force horses, you should never have to force a horse over a fence. Starting from the very beginning, you should bring horses up to low fences, starting with poles on the ground, And if they don't want to go over it, you don't beat the hell out of them. You just educate them some more until they will go over it. And then until they go over a simple pole on the ground calmly. And then you just simply build it up from there. When the horse will move forward over a single pole, then you can add more poles. Then you can add jumps in the line, in the grid, and go from there. And as long as you keep the goodwill of the horse, it won't be trying to stop. But once again, as long as you've done the work to get the horse to that point, no horse should be going over fences that aren't working over their backs. It destroys their legs. And once again, why we're seeing all of these jumper horses today, so many of them. But if you want to see what jumping is supposed to look like, watch Marcus Enning from Germany, Ehning, amazing. Classical rider. He just retired his horse after 20 years of competition. And if you watch him go around, it just looks like it looks like a dressage horse going around over 6-foot fences. And that's what you want to do. Totally calm. Then you're safe. Way too many people are being injured by horses these days. By holding them against their hands, which is what causes them to fall down. So if a horse starts to trip with you and you're holding against its mouth, it's going to fall down with you if you don't let go. Also why we want to ride with a light rein. We want the horse to be balanced over the ground. You can't count on the fact that the footing is always going to be perfect underneath you. The way so many people in dressage now, they won't ride their horse in a ring unless it's got $500,000 worth of sponge cushion underneath it. And the way they're going about it, it really doesn't even do that much good. Their horses still go lame. though it probably does help to some degree. Now this is starting to look nice here. The stretch is getting deeper. Very much on track here. That, I really like how you implemented all of my suggestions from the last time. And I think you're basically on track here, just with the addition of just talking, as I talked about, working a little closer, bringing the horse into some smaller circles, and then pushing the hindquarters away. Once again, think of it as riding. You're just doing a little shoulder in. And as soon as the horse yields, we use the size of the circle as the reward, which is simply effort or less effort. So we've got to appeal to the horse's kind of a sense of, wanting to do as little as possible. Just like people do. And if we show them, okay, we come in here, instead of banging on the horse's mouth or whipping it, actively forward, let it come in and just keep it moving actively. And as soon as it starts to yield, you let it back onto a larger circle. But without ever trying to press the horse into any frame. Once again, we never try to compress the horse with side reins or these kinds of things. They have absolutely no value. We don't want to compress the horse's neck back. We want to keep sending the horse's back end underneath it. And that changes everything in front. Once again, it takes about 2 years for this process to take place. That is 2 years from the time that you get the horse stretching consistently over its back. And what will happen, a horse like this will look much more uphill. Its withers will pull up through the shoulders. And as it develops another foot of top line up there, the horse will look much bigger. And it will look uphill. But once again, that's part of the problem today is, the breeding is so good that we're breeding horses that look like they're already trained. They look like they've already gone through that process, but they feel wonderfully imbalanced when you get on them as young babies. And therein lies, the problem for the horses themselves, because the people try to rush them because they feel so good at such a young age and have so much flexibility. But of course, if you don't harness that flexibility by getting the horse working over its back, the more powerful they are, the sooner they wear out their joints. So that's the thing to realize. These giant movers, that's once again why so many of them are being injected all the time, is because they've got all this great movement, so much more than a horse maybe like this, when I'm talking about these $1 million movers. But if they're not working over their backs, all that thrust that they have is just going all to the wrong places and into the hard tissue, once again, as we talk about. So get them over their backs and they'll last a lot longer. You can have a lifetime of fun with a horse. Really nice stretch there. So you're certainly getting to a great place with this. I'm liking everything I'm seeing. It just needs to get that next step of just being a little more consistent, but I think you're well on your way. Once again, as well as this horse is coming along here, I wouldn't worry too much still about the canter. I'd wait till this horse gets stretching more consistently in the trot. And once again, if you do try the canter, which is perfectly fine to do and try occasionally, you just want to try it. But, a circle or two around. If the horse isn't getting over its back within a couple of circles, you want to bring it back to the trot, because the faster we go on a horse, the harder the pressure is on the horse's legs. So we don't want to spend a lot of time cantering. That's why it's so important that we start the walk and we get the horse over its back before we even go to the trot. Then we go to the trot. We hope that, my basic rule is if I can get a horse working over its back and into the stretch within, a few minutes, 5 minutes at the most maybe, I'm going to bring the horse right back to the walk and get what I can do correct. It's much more important to get what you can do right and build on that than it is to keep trying to do more things. Good stretch here. We're certainly getting to a good place with this. So keep up the good work. I look forward to seeing the next one. Get the horse pushing away the hindquarters a little bit more, a little closer to it. This is Will Faerber from Archer Ride. Great job.